2 is the notes. If you just have out 2, we may not get to 3 or 4. I'm hoping we have time for questions on 3 and 4. But 2 is the notes for today. Anybody have no idea what I'm talking about? All right. Audience participation is appreciated today. So if we look and we remember that equation of a line can be this form, which we call slope-intercept. This might be a more unusual form to some of us, standard form. Okay, we'll talk more about what that means, but it just means you got an x and a y and you can arrange things to look like this. We'll talk about the rules of standard form in a second. But which of these are linear equations then? Can anybody tell me one that isn't a linear equation? Miranda? Okay, Miranda says this one is not. What does it graph as? Anybody? It's a quadratic. It graphs as a parabola. Very good. Not a line. What else? You find one that is or isn't. You decide. Absolute value is or isn't? Isn't. Do you remember what shape that is? A V. Nice job. We will learn in this class that all absolute values are not V's, but linear absolute values are V's. What else? Square root is not. It looks like a half a sideways parabola. Anything else? What do you think? That guy's for sure, right? That's slope-intercept. That's easy. This is the standard form. This is kind of standard form, and actually some books call this standard form because you just moved over the constant and made it equal to 0. All right? The other 3 are not necessarily what we would consider regular lines, right? This one has 0 slope, and does anybody know what that would graph as? Do you remember from yesterday? Horizontal. It crosses the y. And so if we were in this form, what's the slope? You'd have 0x minus 5, right? So this is 0 slope, horizontal line. Vertical? Is there a vertical line up there?
Yeah.
Okay, some people want to say that this is not a line. Had this discussion last class, but it is a line. It's a vertical line. It's not a function, okay, because it can't be written in y equals form. And if you think about a vertical line, does it fail the vertical line test? Remember that test for a function where if you can plot more line? Okay, so this is a special case. It is a vertical line. It could be written in this form, right? 1x plus 0y equals 6. Does that work? So this is a vertical line and it has undefined slope, but it is a linear equation. What about this one? I'm not feeling so confident, huh? If you divide the x over to the other side, it would graph like this. It's called a reciprocal function. It's got asymptotes and all that garbage. Okay. All right. We talked about slope yesterday. Slope is change in y, change in x, lots and lots of different definitions, okay? This is a page out of a book, not even our book. So tell me some things you can remember about our discussion about slope. Oh, be careful. Okay, rise over run works, and the change in business works, but it's what? Change in y over x. I know. Which, when we were back in algebra, teacher wrote it like this, right?
Yeah.
Instead of the little change in. What else? Got something else you want to throw up there? You could flip it around, yep. You could write change in the vertical component over change in horizontal, if I could spell. You could write the tilt or steepness of a line. You could write M. Right? M is what stands for slope. Who figured that out? It's M?
Those are the questions they ask.
I know. M for slope? Really? Don't get it. I wish there was like a Hofbauer rule that I could make some rule that we all had to follow, but I don't know who made the rule that has to be M. I don't know. Don't know the answer. Right. S is used sometime for just side, like the number of sides. And they use S in what's called Heron's formula for a semi-perimeter. Yeah. All right. Did you do semi-perimeter last year in Heron's formula? In geometry. Yep. All right. We have to know these three forms of a line. Slope-intercept, you're good with? Y equals mx plus b? Got that guy down. Point-slope, I hope everybody has seen before. Don't maybe remember it. Let me tell you where it comes from first. Does this look like something we just wrote? Okay. How is that related to this? If I get rid of these 2's, and then I say, well, I don't like a denominator, so I'm going to multiply it over here. Is that really the same thing? I have it on the opposite sides, and the m is at the back, but it's the same thing, right? It's really just another form of slope. Let me talk about why you use this. If I have a point like -2, 4, and I tell you the slope is 5, I've given you a slope and a point, and I say find me the equation. Let's see, a slope and a point and a slope. Oh, point-slope form must be helpful for that, right? So we go y minus, what's the y in my three numbers here? Which one's a y? 4. M is the slope. I'm doing this order right here. So the m is the 5, and then x minus the x of this point, which would be -2 or +2 back here, and then we could distribute and move it around if we wanted to. Does that make sense? So point slope is very helpful given a point and given a slope, which they do all the time, right? They'll say find an equation perpendicular to y equals 3x plus 7 through the point to 8. You know the slope and you know the point. So that you all need to be able to use that version. Now, standard form says it's got a bunch of really weird rules, okay? I wish I was famous and called this Hofbauer form or something, because somebody decided these rules as well. They decided that you're going to put x and y on the same side. They have to be integers. Every number in this question has to be integers. What does that mean? Whole numbers, positive or negative. No decimals, no fractions. We good? And it says right here that the first number, a, has to be positive, greater than 0. So this doesn't work because you'd have to change all the signs, okay? The first guy out in front's got to be positive. You also can't have 1/2 x plus y equals 5. You'd have to multiply through by a 2 and get rid of all the fractions, okay? Because this is not standard form until you're rid of the fractions. All right, let's practice on these problems right here. This is number 3. How would we change from slope-intercept to standard for this question? Okay, add the 4x over to the other side, so we'd have 4x plus y equals 3.5. Is that standard form?
No.
3.5 is not an integer, right? Everything has to be an integer. We could do this a lot of different ways. We could move a decimal over, but then everything would be reducible. We'd have 40x plus 10y equals 35, and we could divide everything. I like Miranda's idea. Can we just double it? 3.5 doubled becomes 7, no more decimal, right? So if we multiply everything by a 2 on both sides, we get 8x plus 2y equals 7. Now, is everything divisible by something? No. That's standard form. They use standard form a lot on ACT and SAT because they consider it the pretty form. It just looks nice, right? There's no fractions, decimals, any crazy business. All right, so can you work with this one and tell me what happens when we do some distributing and moving around and get that in y equals form? Have to distribute first. And then get this y by itself, so we end up with what? 2x plus 12. Good job, Riley. All right, what about standard form? Yep. When you start rearranging, you're changing signs, right? So if we subtracted the 2x over to the other side, it would look like this, but we can't have a negative, so we got to change all the signs. 2x minus y equals negative 12. It's okay for B and C to be negative, just not for A to be negative. So if A turns out negative, you got to change all the signs so that A is positive. Everybody all right? All right, one more. Can you make standard form into slope-intercept? This is what you've probably had a lot of practice at, because when they give you this form and tell you to graph it, it's a pain in the neck, right? So we usually rearrange. I'm going to subtract the 4x and then divide everything by -6. What's that going to come out? Y equals 2/3 x minus 7/6. I'm glad I don't have to graph that accurately, right? Yeah. To the nearest sixth. But do you see now why they would call this the pretty form over here? If that's the same equation, this one looks much nicer, right? The one that says 4x minus 6y equals 7. All right. Let's practice some really rough sketches. Where would this sketch look like? Okay, down here at -5, and then it's going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. I don't know, I'm just drawing a really horrible sketch, okay? Slope? 2. All right, which of these do we already know? The y-intercept, it crosses at -5. What's the name of that ordered pair? Don't everybody talk at once. That ordered pair right there is, cross 0 down 5, right? 0, -5, everybody good? Okay, so the y-intercept always has an x value of 0. So then what are we going to do to find the x-intercept? 0 for the y value. So what do you want me to write down if we solve that? It's okay. If we add the 5 over here, divide by 2, we can write 5 halves or 2.5. Does that make sense? If we'd gone up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, we'd be at like 4, or let's see. We'd be at 2, 1. So if we went up 2 and over 1 again, we'd be at, or -1, I'm sorry, we'd be at 3. What? I don't know, don't listen to me. From -5, if we went up 2 and over 1, we would be at 1, -3. If we went up 2 and over 1, we'd be at 2, we went up 2, right? -1. So then if we went up 2 and over 1 again, we'd be at 3, oh my gosh, 3, 1, yes? Okay. So where did we cross in between here and here? Was 2.5, 0. All right, that was a horrible example because I can't count or add or anything else at this time of the day. All right, what about this guy? When you look at this, do you think, oh yeah, let me throw that on the graph quick? No. That form is not real conducive to graphing. What can you tell me real quick? Do you recognize anything out of that mess? The slope is 1/2. Do you know a point that it goes through? Can anybody pick out the point from point slope? It's x, y was here and here, but remember it was minus. So it is -2 and +1 is the ordered pair that you could tell if you pulled the numbers out from there. Because it's y minus 1 and x minus -2. So if we had to, we could graph -2, +1, and go up a slope of 1/2, blah, blah, blah. Most of us would not have done that. Would you have rearranged it? 1/2 times x and 1/2 times 2. Add 1 over here. 1/2 x plus 2. Does that seem okay with my graph? Did it cross at 2 up here? And I was going up 1 over 2. All right, so what are these? 0, 2 for the y. Remember, for the x, we can put in y equals 0. I don't think so. -1 would be here, yep. To get rid of 1/2 x, we multiply by the reciprocal, so we get -4, right? Half of -4 is -2. Does that look like it could cross over here at -4? Are we all good? All right. This form, the pretty form, isn't super easy to pick out the slope, but it actually is really easy to pick out x and y intercepts. Do you remember we did this yesterday? In this form, if I let y equals 0 to find the x-intercept, I'd have 2x minus 3 times 0 equals 12. 3 times 0 is just 0. Divide by 2 and I get what? 6. So x is 6 when y is 0. If I let x be 0, I'd have 2 times 0 minus 3y equals 12. 2 times 0 is 0. Divide by y by -3 and I get -4 where the x is 0. Could I graph using that method? Yep. Over 6 on the x, down -4 on the y. No matter how big I make that dot, it's not gonna. Yeah, I should just go home again. Use the line tool, something. All right, here's the Hofbauer big dot theorem. There we go. That's the one I named after myself. Remember in geometry when you had to like find all the midpoints and connect them to the opposite side? And they were supposed to be concurrent in a single, oh my gosh. And it never turned out concurrent, but mine did. I always said, yeah, this is the big dot theorem where you just draw a really big dot and then they're all concurrent. All right. Anyway, slope. Yeah, that never happens. And of course, because I'm trying to make a point, it did. Slope, by looking at this, could you tell me the slope? To go from here, you'd go up 4 and right 6 would be 2/3. Most of us would have done what? Some rearranging. Subtract the 2x to the other side. Divide everything by -3. That's supposed to be a negative, sorry. Y equals 2/3 x minus 4. Does that concur with what we got here? We got a -4, slope of 2/3. All right. 30-second candy break before we do the other side. Deal? Come get a piece of candy before you all fall asleep. Or else it's a dance break. I don't know. Do we need a 30-second dance break?
I don't dance. Not good.
Do I have 4 sets of twins this year? You're a twin?
We have a lot of twins in our class. Like
In our school, honestly.
Yeah.
This school is
I think I have 4 sets in pre-calc. All right, so how fast can we fill this in? A function is linear if it can be written in. What are the two forms from the other side? Mx plus b or?
Ax plus by.
Whoa, I can't write. You can talk faster than I can write because I'm messing up here. Ax plus by equals c. Those are the two forms I gave you on the other side. You can write a linear equation in either one of those forms, or both. Then it's linear. Point slope form, anybody quote me that one from the other side?
That would be y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1.
And you remember where that came from?
Yes.
It's really just from the slope, right?
Yes.
Okay, the blank of the non-vertical line through 2 points is m equals, so this is just the word slope. All right. Then we say vertical lines have what kind of slope? Undefined. Good job. Back in the day when I was learning this stuff in high school, we could also call it no slope, but I don't think they do that anymore because 0 and no slope, is that not confusing? 0, none, it just got too confusing. So they decided to go with undefined, which makes it much better. So this is just old school. Vertical lines have an equation like, give me an equation of a vertical line.
X equals 5.
X equals some number, exactly what I was looking for. Yep, x equals 5. X equals negative 3/25. Okay, horizontal lines have what kind of slope? 0 slope. And they look like y equals some number. All right, so that's just a quick overview of what we've done yesterday and today so far. Now let's talk real quick about a specific equation. If it has to go through this specific point to -4, what would the equation of the line through that point be if it was horizontal? This always stumps people, and once you get it, it's really easy. What kind of a line is it? Y equals or x equals? Y equals. Right there, y equals -4, right? So the vertical line through that same point would be x equals 2. Make sense now that you think about it? I promise this will get better, Jundal. You falling asleep over there? You got worksheet 3 and 4 done already? Oh, if you get all this, you can work on those instead. I don't care. If two lines are what, their slopes are equal? Parallel. Okay? Yeah, those aren't very parallel, but now, perpendicular is much more complicated because back in geometry, you learned everything was either parallel or intersecting, right? Or skew. Do you remember what skew meant? Not in the same plane? Yeah. Okay. Intersecting is a whole bunch of lines, right? They could intersect and make tiny little angles, really big angles, everything in between. But only one specific set is perpendicular. They have to make a right angle. So it's very particular. Okay, what happens, oh, that's supposed to be an XY. Okay, what happens if my slope of my line is, let's say, 3/2? How do I find the perpendicular to that? Okay, if I did -3/2, I would go down 3 and over 2. Are those looking like they're going to make a right angle? You have to flip it over, okay? So what if I did 2/3? So I went up 2 and over 3. Okay, the blue one and this green one aren't perpendicular either, right? Yeah, remember I said there's a lot you have to do because otherwise they're just plain old intersecting lines. The lot you have to do, which I'm thinking Jacob was ready to tell me, right? You got to flip it over and change the sign. What are the math words for that? Reciprocal. If you had Miss Soper, it was refliprical, right? So it's called refliprical. It's kind of fun. Flip it over. All right. No, I can't say once. We also changed the sign. Math word for that? Just the opposite, or you could just take the opposite sign. That's going to help you remember what, because people get inverse, opposite, reciprocal. Some of those things all get messed up. Most of us remember reciprocal. Opposite means change the sign. But then we use things like do the opposite operation, and that doesn't really, it's called an inverse operation. All right, so for this one, if we went up 3 and over 2, we'd go down 2 and over 3 to the right, and they would turn out, how did I do? Does it look kind of like a right angle in there? All right, so really fast, what is this? If we have a line 1/4 x minus 6, what would the perpendicular slope be? -4. Flip it over, change the sign, and the parallel slope would be 1/4. All right, number 8, there is a test question or a summative question on this that looks like this, and I'm not sure I gave you a hint on the summative. It says, which best describes the relationship between EF and GH? I guess if it's multiple choice, you got a 1 in 4 shot, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to know how to do it, how can you find the relationship between these two lines? You would need to do what first? Find the slope. So EF, can you figure out the slope? What are you going to do on top? Subtract the y's and the x's on the bottom. Now I tried to do this question earlier today and I got 6 on the bottom. I think it's supposed to be -5, yes? Somebody get a slope of 3/5? I reduced it to 1/2 and kept going, and I was like, what are you doing, off hour? All right, so we got 3/5. What about GH? I got 5/3 this time. On the first quiz on this, Miranda's going to do all the slopes upside down. I can tell already. All right, this is kind of a tricky question, though, because a lot of students get this wrong. Parallel, perpendicular, neither. If you're not sure, think about graphing it. If you go up 3 and over 5 versus up 5 and over 3, are those going to be making a right angle? No. Okay, they both have positive slopes. What's wrong with it? To make it perpendicular, one of them would have had to be negative. So I'm not circling that. I'm just kidding. The answer is neither. Is everybody clear on why it's neither? It's got to flip and change sign. All right. How fast can you graph this accurately? I can tell you I can't do it accurately no matter how slow I go. It says graph 1/2 x plus 4. Then it says find the equation of the line perpendicular to that line, but it has to go through this point, -2, 3. -2, 3 is right here. I'll use the big dot theorem, okay? There we go, big dot. How do we make a line that's perpendicular but goes through that point? Okay, so I could just start at this point if I wanted to graph it first. What's the new slope going to be? The perpendicular slope will be -2. So if I wanted to go over to -2, 3, and just go from there a slope of -2 and over 1, that would actually work. if I had to graph it. What are my choices, though, for coming up with an equation, especially if I don't have graph paper? Well, you know its slope, and you know it goes through a point. So that kind of sounds like, okay, remember how it went? Okay, so y minus, what's the y of the ordered pair? Be careful. Not the x, the y is. Unfortunately, in my example, both the slope and the x value are -2. I hate when that happens, because then when you look back at your notes, you're just like, where did you get that number? Okay, the slope of -2 is here, and then this -2 is here, which will make this a +2. You could stop there if it didn't specify. That is an equation, isn't it, of the line through that point? Unfortunately, on the homework, or the more like the assessment, I am probably going to tell you you need a specific form, probably slope-intercept, because then everyone will have the same answer, and you know it's all about easy grading for Hofbauer, right? Just kidding. Did I do that right? Does it match up with the picture? Cross down here at -1, going down 2/1. Can I show you another method that some of you might have learned? Y equals mx plus b. Give me a y value on that equation, the black line right there. Give me a y value right here. 3. Give me the slope. -2. Give me an x value right here. So I have 3 equals 4 plus b. I subtract, I get -1 equals b. Do I already know the slope? And now I know the b. Could I plug those in and get that equation? Anybody remember doing it that way? No? Yes?
That's a lot easier though.
It just depends. Depends. All right. So you want to try this? You guys try this one on your own. See if you can beat me. I'm going to try to do both ways. Don't look, okay? Anybody get that whichever way you chose to do it? Or did I do something wrong? Which is entirely possible. Oh, it just said through, right? Didn't say you have to do perpendicular. I know. You got to read carefully. I did the same thing on a test. See parallel, automatically think it's going to be tricky. Perpendicular, do the wrong thing. Did I distribute right? Someone get this answer? Okay. Good, good. Anybody stuck? Need me to answer a question? All right. This is the trickiest of all. They give us just 2 points. I think this is the trickiest. What do we have to do? We do have to find the slope first, which means we have to do the y's over the x's, right, Miranda? Mm-hmm. I got 15/6, which reduces by 3 to 5/2. Anybody else? Did I do that right? Now what? We have to make an equation. How are we going to do that? I could do this 4 different ways. I can think of easily. Because I can use that slope and the 0.29. I could use that slope and the point -46. I could use the y equals mx plus b with the 0.29, or the y equals mx plus b with the negative 6. Okay? My choice would probably be to do point slope, because I have a point and a slope. And I'm going to pick 2,9 because they're nice positive numbers. You can use 4,8, it won't matter. You get the same answer. And I can do it both ways if you really want me to, but I know by now you don't care what I do, right? You've been in school how many hours on the second day of school and your brain is falling out of your head? Yeah, I'm with you. It feels like it should be about Thursday already. 5 divided by 2 times negative 2 would be negative 5 if we added 9. Anybody already do this one? Do I have this right? 5 ninths x, 5 halves. Where did that come from? 5 halves x plus 4. Okay. If I tried the other method and maybe even used the other points, I know I'm going to run out of time if I keep doing 2 methods on every problem. 5 halves times negative 4 is negative 10. Add over here and I get b is 4, which is what we figured out the other way, right? Okay. So lots of ways to try these. Let's try one that is perpendicular. This is a cheater question. I love cheating on this question. Because perpendicular slope is going to be what to 2/3? Negative 3 halves. Anybody know why I'm calling this a cheater question? Like, you can be done right now. When it says 0, 3, what is that point? Picture it in your mind. Over 0, up 3. It's already the what? Y-intercept. So b is 3. So y equals the slope of negative 3 halves x plus 3. Would it have worked if I did this? Sure. By the time I add that 3 over there, I get this. Okay? Sometimes we can cheat. We can recognize the intercept ahead of time. Ready? What are we supposed to do here? Parallel, right? Okay. What do we have to do first, though? Find this slope, because it's not in a nice form. Okay, if I get it in that form, what's the slope? 4. Do I have to flip it over and change the sign? Not for parallel. So now you guys finish? Is it what? I got a 12. Negative 12 is the y-intercept. Anybody else? No? Yes? How could I check that real quick? I could put the 1 in the 8 and make sure it works, right? If I put the 1 in, 4 minus 12 is negative 8. That seems like that point would be on that line. All right, last question. Perpendicular bisector. What? Okay, I have a point over 2 up 6. That's somewhere in here. Over 0 down 8, somewhere in here. So this is the line we're talking about right now. But it didn't ask us to find that line. It asked us to find this line. What do I need to know about that line? I need to know the slope of the original line. Good job. So negative 8 minus 6 over 0 minus 2 is negative 14. Over negative 2 is a slope of 7. That's a lovely slope. Okay, then what? So negative 1/7 is the perpendicular slope. But if it's a perpendicular bisector, what point does it have to go through? The midpoint. Do you remember how to find a midpoint from yesterday? Average the x's. 2 plus 0 divided by 2 is 1. Average the y's. I can't read that. 6 plus negative 8 over 2 is negative 1. So now what? We got to use this and this perpendicular slope, yes? Oh, this is a disgusting display, isn't it? We could stop right there. What do you think? Is that an equation? If we kept going and distributed that, what if I made you get it in standard form? Are you just hating right now?
My brain's falling out the
I know, we can stop. I'm just being difficult. What would you have to do to finish that? Honestly, I don't care what form you have it in. You would have to multiply through by a 7, right? I don't know. I probably made a mistake somewhere. Did anybody
That looks right.
catch a mistake?
Close enough.
That looks right. That's what I got.
All right, so what is your homework? You can do all of worksheet 3 and 4 now, okay? All of worksheet 3 and 4, including side B of worksheet 4. Tomorrow we're going to talk about application problems.